Today I want to talk about the 2 days I spent on Tiritiri Matangi, a small but predator-free island in New Zealand's Hauraki Gulf that's become one of the country's most important conservation success stories. Just a few decades ago, much of the island was farmland, but after a huge restoration effort involving many volunteers and hundreds of thousands of planted native trees, it's now home to some of New Zealand's rarest birds and reptiles. To get there, we took the ferry from Auckland City all the way across the Hauraki Gulf, but before even reaching the island, the birding had already started. Along the way we saw this reef heron, this Arctic skua, these 3 fluttering shearwaters, and this pied shag.
See the gannet up there?
Not to forget this Australasian gannet, or this white-fronted tern. And as a special treat, we even spotted this little blue penguin floating in the water. After around 1.5 hours, we reached Tiritiri Wharf, where we began disembarking the boat. And it wasn't long until I got my first lifer on the island, these 2 patiki, of which there are less than 1,000 left in New Zealand. This is a good time to mention that I will be flip-flopping between both the Māori and the English names for these birds, based on whatever's most familiar to me. But I will do my best to put both the names in the titles next to the birds like I did here, so that maybe we can learn something together. The next bird I came across was in this forested area, and that was the whitehead. Probably one of the least threatened birds that calls Tiritiri home, but it's not often you're able to get this close and see so many of them in one place. We next made our way to the area around the lighthouse where we caught a glimpse of the iconic takahe, another one of New Zealand's flightless and threatened bird species. This is also a good time to say that we actually stayed the night on the island and booked spots in the hut a few months in advance. So it was at this point that we dropped our stuff off, had a quick lunch break, and then headed out for a proper walk. And the first bird I noticed on that walk was this big old kereru sitting in this tree. And that was quickly followed by this adorable family of brown quail crossing the track right in front of us. We then had a close encounter with this little North Island robin. They like to feed on insects that they can get to if you kick up a bit of dirt underneath your shoes, so it's a good trick to remember if you want to get close-up shots of them. Next up, I got to see another bird I'd never seen before, the tiaki, or saddleback. This is another one of New Zealand's conservation success stories where the bird was thought to be extinct on the mainland by 1910 and now has a population of around 7,000 to 8,000 thanks to islands like this one where they've survived. After a little while walking, we reached one of these seeded areas where we saw some of the birds up close taking a dip in the water, like this bellbird. That was followed by another new lifer for me, the hihi, or stitchbird. What followed was a quick and healthy snack break before getting ready to get walking again, but not before hearing the familiar sound of a New Zealand fantail up above. What I want to talk about next is the Rifleman, or Titipounamu. This is New Zealand's smallest bird and probably the hardest to find on the island. And I'm going to tell you now, I didn't manage to get a picture of it, but if you listen closely you can hear its high-pitched, almost metallic sounding call. We then made our way all the way to the edge of the island where I noticed this masked lapwing on the shore. It was then time to get back to our accommodation to have a chill and have some food before waiting for dark. A few hours later we headed out into the darkness. Trying to be as slow and quiet as possible and with red film over our flashlights, the first creature we came across was this Duversel's gecko, followed closely by a tuatara, of which we saw quite a few. And then, out of nowhere, came the highlight of all highlights, this little spotted kiwi. This was one of the main reasons we decided to stay overnight on the island, and I can't believe it worked. After that encounter, we headed back and tried to get a few more hours sleep. We headed out early the next morning to see how much of the dawn chorus we could hear, and take a listen to these bellbirds. The next bird I wanted to try and see was this kakariki. But as you can see, it did elude me quite a few times. But in the end, the persistence paid off and I was able to get close enough to it to take these nice shots. Next up was another one of the big highlights. This is a bird that not everyone that visits the island is lucky enough to see. But lucky for us, we noticed 2 North Island kōkako singing up in the trees. Its hauntingly beautiful long song is legendary, and a pair like this could be heard singing together sometimes for over an hour in the mornings. The next bird I saw was something I'm very familiar with in Europe, but I didn't know until recently that they have this in New Zealand, and that's the yellowhammer. And that was followed by a bird I've seen of course many times in New Zealand, the kōkako. Our ferry ride home was in a couple of hours, so it was time to loop back and head in the direction of the wharf. On the way back we noticed of course one of the most iconic New Zealand birds posing for us, the tui. We stopped at that rest area from yesterday and I noticed another korimako up close. This one had an interesting feather coloration on its face. I'm definitely no expert on this, but I'm told it could be something like leucism in birds. But if anyone knows more, feel free to write a comment. On the way back we noticed another special creature, a weta punga. These are so big they can actually be heavier than a mouse or a sparrow when fully grown. And 150 of them were released onto the island in 2014 to bolster the population. And that about wraps up my trip to Tiritiri Matangi. It wasn't my first time on the island, but it was my first time staying the night on the island, and it was really worth it. But even if you've only got time for a day trip, I'd still really recommend it. For anyone visiting New Zealand who's interested in birds, this is honestly a place you shouldn't miss. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love it if you left a comment or subscribed, and I'll catch you on the next one.